So if everybody's settled in, maybe I can start directly. I'm from Singapore. My name is Eden. I think let's make it informal. One is that I was told by Vikas that I'm only supposed to have 5 slides. So I faithfully followed 5 slides and without much content. I mean, not without much content, it's some simple words, okay? So do please, I've seen some of the better slides in the last few discussions. Please pardon it. Pardon me, I'm using the slide to guide me along to discuss the topic about vocational education, okay? Just to have a feel, how many of you are educators? Okay, yeah, well, okay, fine. I'm a little bit apprehensive again also because I'm an engineer. I got 2-3 degrees in engineering, but not a single degree in education. So I'm probably not the expert in telling you about pedagogy and so on and so forth, but certainly I've spent the last the reason why I put down the last 2 decades of vocational education development in Singapore is because one is that there was some change, some major changes in Singapore on vocational education, but the other is because I also got involved in those changes. So I thought I would share this sort of period with you. There's no sort of specific cutoff date when things have changed, but there was very rapid development in very recent years. Okay, okay. So maybe a bit of my background, just to let you know how I spent my last 20 years. In 1992, I was asked to join the Nanyang Polytechnic. It was a new polytechnic with the School of Health Sciences. I was from the healthcare sector. And so I went in and together with the management team, we started a new polytechnic from scratch. And we started with 2,000 students. Now they have about 15,000 students. And again, I have another great opportunity in 2002, 10 years later. I had an opportunity to start another polytechnic, the Republic Polytechnic, again, starting from scratch with 800 students, and now about, I think it's about 15,000 students as well. And if some of you may know about Republic Poly, they have this problem-based learning approach throughout the whole organization. The Nanyang Polytechnic, which I worked with, which I'm quite familiar, was also, they have this so-called teaching factory concept. So there has been, at the institutional level, there have been great effort to make some changes to the way vocational education is going through, okay? And then the last job that I have was a principal of a vocational school, which takes in about 9,000 students, and I ran it for about 5 years before going to HQ to do some work. So this will be based on those 3 sort of occurrences where I had some activities with the education sector. Okay. Oops. Oh, okay. That's back. Okay, just to help you understand, one of the major change 20 years ago, in fact in 1992, was that vocational education was not done, ceased to be done at the secondary school level. So it was now pushed into the post-secondary. That means after 10 years of general education, then they go into the vocational education, okay? I may have to give you a little bit description of our general education system. We are very test-based type of education system. At the age of 10, there will be a common test across all the age, within the age group. At the age of 12, there's another common test. At the age of 16, there's another common test. Then they get into this sector, okay? And then, of course, for those going to university, there's another common test at the age of 18, okay? So, why I mentioned about this common test is that in Singapore education system, we try to stream people. We try to say, okay, you are the academically abled one, and therefore you should go to the group on top, which is the junior colleges, which is to prepare for university. what in the English system will be the advanced level, the A level. And then for those that are the rest, they go into some sort of vocational education, either in polytechnic for a 3-year diploma program or a 2-year certificate training program, more for the craftsman or skilled workman level. Okay, so if you look at the numbers, which is a little bit difficult to see, I realize, the number that goes into the junior college, and this is the percentage of the students who get into the post-secondary sector. 28% goes to a junior college, 48% go to the polytechnic, and 24%. It almost looked like 100%, but actually I have rounded up the numbers. Only about 0.5% did not get into the post-secondary sector. So most of our students go into the post-secondary sector. In Singapore's case, we have compulsory education, but only for primary school. That means for the first 6 years, they have compulsory education, but beyond that, there's no compulsory education. But fortunately, the young people wants to be in a school. So they go into their secondary school and then move on to the post-secondary. And in that sense, we have been very successful in capturing the whole cohort of students. Singapore, for those who are not familiar, is a very small state, okay? We have about 3 million citizens, okay? 3.5 million citizens. I won't elaborate on how many foreign workers are there in Singapore, but basically we cater to 3.5 million people. And all of us have a piece of plastic called the identity card. And so they can track us right to, who have gone where and so on and so forth. Especially in the school system. Of course, if you are working, it's a little bit harder, but still they can track you. Okay, so I may want to just highlight in this particular chart that 72% of the people go into vocational education, which I think may be a good thing for any country to have. Lesser people go into academic. I know of the experience because I've traveled a bit China and some of the countries. I realize that many countries are also trying to push more into vocational education. So that's one strategy that if you are in your country and you may be thinking about it at a policy level, you can think about this, that we should get more people all prepared for vocation before they leave the education system. So that's one thing that I should highlight. The other thing that have developed quite well as far as the Ministry of Education in Singapore is concerned was that they created so-called pathway from certificate level to diploma level and to university level. Prior to this, if you are certificate, that's it. That's a terminal qualification. If you are diploma, that's it. Diploma is a terminal qualification. And I think we followed the example of the world, and we are slowly moving towards a situation where people can move from certificate to diploma to degree level, and which is a good thing. Because in the past, the first line that you see, which we call the junior college or the pre-university education, is very popular amongst the better students. So all the good students with good grades will try to get in. And if you can't get in, then you drop into a poly. But now the situation is, because the poly students can also get into a university, many of the good students with 5As, 6As, 7As goes in the poly system as well. So in a way, it helps to balance out. Okay? The only piece that is a little bit more challenging is where I came from, the Institute of Technical Education. We take 25% of the cohort. They are still stuck at the bottom because they still have to do 2 years before they go into a polytechnic, okay? And then they can go into a university. So still, it's the least desired choice. And we will talk about it a bit later if we have chance. Huh? Okay. The other thing that I think I don't, any Singaporean here? I have to confess that I don't totally agree with all the government policy, but these policies, I think the Singapore government have done very well. One is that because of the expansion of the poly system, because of the expansion of IT system, we built, the government paid a lot of money to build several good facilities, good infrastructures for the Singaporeans. So 50 years ago, we built the first two polytechnics, and within the period of the last 20 years, we built 3 new polytechnics, and I was involved in 2 of them. The last one that was built was Republic Poly in 2006. It got a Japanese architect. So it's fantastic and it's very good. And then at the IT level, which is the so-called craftsman level, we also built 3 mega campuses to replace the existing smaller school. Okay, so again, having big, nice campus that looks like university, and I've met many foreigners who comes in and says, "Ha, you mean this is a vocational school?" No, this looks like a university. So they spent a lot of money on how nice it looks. But of course, the interior is also important. So facilities like lab facilities, teaching facilities, lecture halls, all these are also, the government spends quite a lot of money on it. And again, this have really boosted the desire to come into nice aircon workshop and things like that. So spending a bit of money on infrastructure might be a solution in trying to get people interested in vocational education. And the third item that I have on that is the comprehensive sort of student facilities. Okay, well, traditionally, if you look at a typical vocational school, or I've seen many vocational schools, it's basically the workshop, classrooms, and that's about it. But with this kind of so-called mega campus, which house about 10,000 students, you can afford swimming pool, you can afford football field, you can afford auditoriums, you can afford theaters and things like that, and really give our students an opportunity to so-called display their skills. And we must always remember, just because he's sent for vocational training, that doesn't mean he have no talents. We must discover that talents. And in that sense, I totally support my government that they have spent the money in the right place in that sense, building up the infrastructure for the students of Singapore. The other thing that I want to highlight as I would say a great improvement in the last 20 years is about what I call relationship. One, the relationship with industry. Because now there's 4 polytechnics, 3 IT colleges, there's a bit of competition to try to get industry to work with us. But also, the good thing is that industry also were very keen, industry players were also very keen to also engage us, because in Singapore, we are quite short of manpower. So there was a very symbiotic type of relationship between the colleges and the colleges, the polytechnic, and the industry. They get involved in curriculum advisory, they get involved in industrial student attachment. They even spend money to donate laboratory equipment for us, and this is really good because, for example, I worked with in one of the college in the college I worked with, we got Festo, or we got some of these companies. They come in every 2 years, give us some pneumatic equipment. Then 2 years later, with the latest update, they give us another set. So how, of course, you have to also help them by branding it, giving them the brand name and things like that. But that's cheap, just put some stickers for them, and they will usually pay for the stickers, and brand it for them, and allow them to. But donation from the industry, partnership with the industry is really important. That we can really make the sort of a teaching environment very authentic. Another relationship, I think we have done well at the institutional level, not so much the ministry level. At the institutional level, is that there is a big desire to work with the community, getting our students involved in the community projects. So not just purely your skill, but also how do you work with people? How do you do projects in the community? So many of our students are involved in all kinds of projects, healthcare projects, building improvement projects with the community. But I also have to say that which I really don't quite, we start putting advertisement stickers on buses to highlight the kind of education that we provide. I know the university does it, but then the technical vocational education also begin to do this. I thought it was a little bit off. But the important point about doing this is that we want to highlight vocational education is useful, it's important, and in a way give it a little bit of shine, a bit of glamour, which may be necessary to help our students to understand that this is very important. Then the last item, I think the even more important relationship that I think, and especially at our ITE, the Institute of Technical Education, the lowest level of education that cater for the last 25%, is that we really, really take care of the students. And we have this focus, which we call it the ITE care, you know. And every time I meet, after I left the college, I meet students, I was like, hey, hello, principal, and blah, blah, blah. You know, I really enjoy my stay in the college, you know. And then when they go to polytechnic, they realize it's lecture tutorial, nobody cares about them. Go to university, I tell them, if you go to university, it will be worse, you know. Nobody cares, you know. You never see your tutor. Sorry for those who are from the university sector. But you never bother to see your tutor and so on and so forth. But at the IT level, caring for the student is important as part of their learning requirement, because if you care for the students will learn in some way. And of course, again, back to the whole idea of creating situation, and this again need to involve staff. Creating situation where students got chance to display their artistic talent, whether it's singing, dancing, sports, and so on and so forth. We must remember that not everybody will be a precision engineer, not everybody will be an electrician, not everybody will be a plumber. Some of them can be a, you know, media, well, or a Bollywood star, or whatever it is, or some singer, and so on and so forth. We must make sure that these opportunities are given to this group of students. Sometimes we just think in terms of, these are only craftsman level. But think about it. There aren't that many people who can sing and dance. And after joining the college, I realized that I got lots of them who can sing and dance and kick football well. I always say to my colleagues, yeah, they didn't study very well, but there must be something that have been keeping them very busy, you know. And some of them are busy playing football, you know. And if in a better, of course, environment, you know, playing football, maybe a millionaire, you can be a millionaire, right? Okay, so that's all I thought I just want to emphasize, and perhaps you can answer. But I just want to close off with this little bit. Perhaps it's a better that, luckily we have a very small group. Maybe we can share what you consider, for example, the vocational versus the academic route. You know, traditionally in our Chinese culture, in the Singapore culture, we always want our son and daughters to be doctors and lawyers and so on and so forth. And when they don't get into those kind of academic situation, we get very discouraged. How do we help our students to feel not so discouraged? I think that's why very important. That's why I say, you know, it's always seen as a second cousin. But to me, vocational education is a very useful tool. One, based on all the educational theories and so on and so forth, hands-on learning is one of a very important method of learning theory and knowledge. And here, a vocational education system provides that opportunity for them to pick up knowledge, which they struggle with when you give them a straight science and maths problem. Recently I came across some discussion internally with IIT. We took in the worst of the so-called O-level passes, worst of the secondary school, and then we give them instead of 2 years program, we give them a 3-year program, and then we introduce science and maths, because we say, I must have science, must have maths. But they suddenly realize the student don't turn up for the science and maths, or no, not science and maths, English and maths. Now they are all the while, for the last 10 years, they've been struggling with English. They couldn't get their grammar right, they couldn't get their spelling right, and so on and so forth. And here we are trying to repeat those things again. And similarly, we are trying to repeat the maths. But couldn't we? So the thought then was to discuss how do we integrate it with our learning within the vocational context. So why learn English by itself? Why not learn to say, okay, I'm going to build this little chair, with wood and whatever material, and be able to explain it. And that's using English, using communication skills. So that's one thing that I think we need to use the hands-on learning to motivate these students to want to stay, to want to know a bit more. The other is, there's a great variety of choice in vocational education. Unlike the typical science and maths and arts, literature and so on and so forth, there's not that much choice if you think about the typical academic program. But here you have, electronics. Oh, there you have IT, over there you have. So there's a whole range of choice. In a way, if you can give them some choice that they are quite happy with, I'm sure it will definitely engage them in their study. Our problem is that we always want them to study something and say, this is important for you because you need to know maths. Otherwise, you are useless to society and so on and so forth. But if they say, I'm interested in fixing a robot and I'm interested in getting something move on the ground and things like that, that's learning. So, and of course, vocational education provide them a basic groundwork to go into the industry. Sometimes we can't get them to the best skill, right skill, or whatever it is, but let them go into the industry. Point them to the industry. If they are from studying electronics, point them to the electronic industry. Instead of because young people, I find that most of them are a little bit lost. You leave them with an O-level or N-level so-called results, they're really lost. What should they do next? But at least if you force them to go spend 2 years in electronic, one option is that I could go into the electronic industry, and then they can really build up their skills there. Okay, so to me, how can we make vocational education sexy, and which is very important? How can we make our young people to believe that this is useful for them, rather than it is, it is not as good as their brothers or sisters or cousins that have gone on to the professional stream. Okay? So I leave this and for discussion. You may disagree with me, and I'm certainly happy to hear your comments. Any comments so far? Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, and this does address your last point, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the curricular approach. You've mentioned hands-on learning, you've mentioned problem-based learning. I'd like to understand a little bit more about the curriculum and the curricular, kind of the pedagogy that's used in the vocational training schools, and if that differs from the university.
In the current Institute of Technical Education that I am in, which is for skilled craftsman training, we use I think it's a Canadian model of DECUM, where we actually get the industry people to define all the different jobs and the level of skill required, and then we build up our curriculum from there. So a lot of this starts from the industry feedback, and then we will build our curriculum based on that. And the tendency is that, well, they must make sure they knows all these, 30 items. It's a bit of rote learning, but I always feel that we must engage them. They may not know them, that 30 items so well, but the minute they step into industry and when they start fixing the first radio and when they fix the 30th radio, I'm very sure they will be quite good at it. But they need to roughly know the theory, the knowledge behind the electronics of things. So that's my gut feel. But the traditional curriculum approach is that it will follow a sort of industry survey, then followed by curriculum development. It's quite well known. It's a Canadian approach. If you search DACUM, D-A-C-U-M, something curriculum, I can't remember what it is. Yeah, design with curriculum or something like this. Sorry, if anybody can help me. DACUM. Yes, yes, ma'am. Sorry. Whoever.
Thank you. Well, Singapore is an internationally known case because they seem to have a lot of good practices in terms of vocational education. From your presentation, I get that making it attractive to young students is one of the secrets. Do you have any other kind of key factors in the Singapore experience that make it such a special model?
I think sometimes we tend to be a bit boastful, but I think really, actually the environment actually helped us, because I always look at the young people and I look at the parents. Well, the parents really want to get rid of their children. They don't want the children to stay at home. And we got this funny thing called national service, and they, until the age of 18, they have to go to army, for their national service. So if somehow they drop out at the age of 16 and don't go into post-secondary, they are literally so-called on the streets. So the good thing is that the parents, the young people themselves, the young student themselves wants to come in. So we are very lucky. So we are a very small community. You don't have situation in which you have, the young person have to travel 20 miles to the next vocational school, or got to find ways to, get into a city to, we don't have the rural context that you have to deal with. In fact, we don't have a residential program, So in a culture where young people and parents are all set on the young, the person coming to school, that give us a big advantage over, I think, maybe other society or other nation or whatever it is. In fact, sometimes I get into trouble, some of these students get to fight, and create a not so safe environment for the young person, So we want to dismiss them. The parent will come to you and says, please, keep them for one more year. Never mind if you don't study anything, just keep them. So I always tell we are a little bit like a child care center for these people. But you think more deeply into it. Basically, we are holding him and preventing him from walking out into the street and getting involved with other people, which can be more dangerous than if we can hold them in the school. At least there will be some watchful eyes over it. And I think we should do that. And that's why I think we should push for vocational education as one big piece at the bottom layer. We know. I forgot to mention, actually, there's one little thing called SEN underneath. Now our struggle is actually, we get all these what you call special education need, disabled students coming in. Because our education, our secondary primary school education system improved. So many of them start flooding up to the post-secondary sector, and we are hit, well, not say hit by it, we are receiving it. Of course, there are people who argue that they must go to special school. I said, no, we have to get them integrated with people, because eventually they will have to be integrated in the society. So again, this is one big challenge. When you start capturing all and all and sundry into your education system, you start running into the most marginal kind of problems. Yeah, sorry.
I really enjoyed your talk. Do you think the secret is a design is mainly based on the design? I know you guys do great designs in Singapore. For example, I'm looking at Africa right now, and we just built one of the first computer kit called Kanu, where children can make it. But one of the things I'm struggling with is the curriculum and how this will be integrated. So we already have the curriculum, but what is the one advice you can give us on making sure the curriculum is well implemented, but in a very kind of like linear way, very simple?
Well, in the case of the Institute of Technical Education, although we have 3 colleges, about 9,000 to 10,000 students each, but all the so-called so-called design approval process are done centrally, so there is some kind of quality control, and even the examination assessment process is also done centrally. We follow some certain methodology. We mentioned that DICOM, okay? So I think all these help, but ultimately, because you are running 100 courses, some for hairdressing, some for nursing, some for engineering, some for IT, some for design or whatever, there will be some variation in terms of outcome. Some will be very engaging, some will be less engaging. But having a central system has its strength, but also has its weakness, because then everybody keep insisting that the examination must be the only way to assess people, and if there's any problem with the quality in terms of examination process and so on and so forth, we get hammered a lot, from the central side. So but generally having a good control on the system. In fact, most of the education institutions, the polys, the ITEs, ourselves, we have all this, what we call ISO 9000, having sort of quality standards similar to what the industry is practicing, and going through the process. I guess it's not important, the ISO 9000, but more important is the process, making sure that you have proper process documented, because you must remember, your people come in at different time, in the case of ITE, there's about 2,500 staff, and they come at different time, and they need instruction. So having some kind of process, documented process, I think will be very helpful. I know time is up. Maybe one last question, dying question? Sorry.
Thank you very much. As vocational, this is something that we are struggling in Nepal, that a couple of years ago, our government introduced the vocational course as well. But what happened is when the people finish the vocational course, they go and do a job, but there's a big gap that if they want to go for further studies in the normal universities, lots of universities don't accept them. So how to bridge that gap, for part of the lifelong learning? For example, you become a computer technician, you don't want to die with the technician, you want to be a lecturer, for that you need to go further. How the Singapore is dealing with that gap, or you have got what kind of system is in place?
Well, the demand for further education is always there, at least in the case of Singapore. So as I mentioned earlier, we have now several pathways for them to go. And as I mentioned also, the polytechnics and the so-called A-levels, so-called pre-university students now see that both pathways are legitimate ways to get to university. And sometimes the university, after they receive some of our students, especially in the technology, STEM area, they're very happy with our polytechnic students because they are practical. Whereas the A-level students typically do advanced maths, pure maths, applied maths, and very fancy maths. But at the end of it, when you ask them to build something, they can't. So in a way, it will take a bit of time to educate our university. But the good thing is that there are a lot of private or Australian university, British university, willing to take our students with 1 year exemption, 1-2 years exemption. So it will take some time for the national universities to wake up to the fact that there are good students among this group of from the vocational stream. And there are, and many of the last 25% actually move on to university after they go through the polytechnic. Yeah. Okay, I'm very sorry, the time is up. Thank you very much for all the,